Hi, I'm Dana, and in today's episode of Learning to be Autistic, I want to discuss gender a bit more. I did make a video a little while ago about my sexuality and my gender, so that'll be linked here, hopefully. It'll be linked somewhere, but I wanted to go a bit more in-depth today because a lot of people that are autistic experience gender in a different way to a lot of neurotypicals. There's, from what I've read, quite a high number of autistic people that are trans, and I do feel, personally for me, like being autistic really plays into my gender and the way that I identify. So I want to talk about that a bit. I'm not going to go into like the whole like lots of trans people are autistic because I'm not trans and it doesn't feel like something I need to be putting my cis voice to, you know? But I do want to talk about Autigender a lot because that's something I really relate to. And I only recently found it, and it was because one of you guys commented on one of my videos, probably the gender and sexuality one, that sounded like what I was talking about. So I've done some Googling, and I figure like I do a lot of Googling about autism, and if I didn't find this on my own, I feel like it's probably relatively difficult to find, although I am just terrible at finding stuff, so maybe not. But anyway, let's get into it. I'm gonna just really quickly ignore you and read you out the definition of Autigender from the LGBTA wiki. It'll be linked down below if you want to read what's on there for yourself. So Autigender, also known as Autist gender or Autism gender, is a neurogender which can only be understood in the context of being autistic or when one's autism greatly affects one's gender or how one experiences gender. Autigender is not autism as a gender, but rather describes an experience of gender that is so heavily influenced by having autism, being autistic, thank you, that one's autism and one's experience of gender cannot be unlinked. That little passage did also mention neurogender, which is essentially just the same thing but for neurodivergencies as a whole, so like ADHD, bipolar, there's loads of other ones that I can't think of off the top of my head, but there's a lot of different neurodivergencies that can tie in quite strongly to to gender, that can tie in quite strongly to gender. But I don't have those other neurodivergencies, so we're going to focus on Autigender, which is how I prefer to say it. I know you can go for like autism gender, but Autigender sounds cute. So for me, my sort of gender identity is quite confused. I haven't really figured it out yet. So for me, I've never overly felt like a girl. Like this is why it's difficult, because I don't feel, even now I don't feel like a woman. And I know for sure when I was a kid, I didn't pay any attention to gender. I just didn't care, you know? Like I really liked Bratz and Barbie and princesses, but I also really loved Zorro and Lord of the Rings and Doctor Who. I just liked a very large mixture of things that were meant for both boys and girls. And it just never fazed me. I just didn't care. And I do think that's partly my autism. I do think it's partly my mother being brilliant, because my dad was the type that was very like, why are you buying her that? That's a boy's toy and she's a girl. We have to make her have long hair because she's a girl. Whereas my mum was sort of just like, well, she likes it, so I got it her. So even growing up, you know, I had some like proper tomboy phases. I was a tomboy for the most part, I suppose, because I liked being outside. I liked going and playing games and being outside with my friends, the few that I had. But I also really liked dressing up, you know, like I'd come in and put a princess dress on, a little crown and tiara and have my little magic wand. I never wanted to be a boy, but I've never really felt like a girl either. And I also don't think that I lack gender in the way that like non-binary people do. And I also don't feel like although I like a mixture of both masculine and feminine things, and like the way that I dress can vary between the two and everything else, I don't really feel like I'm gender fluid either. Like I don't feel like I feel more feminine or more masculine at different points. I just don't feel like I feel feminine or masculine. I'm just me. I'm just a person. And I don't really, you know, that's where the autism really ties in, because I just don't understand the point of being like segregated by gender. I understand what gender is, you know, I've educated myself enough to understand that like sex and gender identity are different things. I've educated myself enough to understand that like gender is something that can be quite difficult to figure out. It can be something that can change, and you know, it can be a spectrum similar to what they say autism is. And I still don't know where I fit onto that. But Autigender definitely given me a word that I feel better describes how I feel. You know, and at the end of the day, as much as I do respect people's gender identity and how they choose to like describe or feel their gender, I completely respect it. To me personally, it's very much a case of like, gender is completely fucking made up. Like, it's a complete social construct, and it's not one that I understand. I don't get it. I don't get why men are meant to be manly. I don't get why women are meant to be womanly. I just don't think it matters, you know? I think that humans, we're all people, and, you know, obviously we all vary in lots of different ways, but at the end of the day, I think we're all the same in that we want to be respected, we want to find happiness, we want people to love us and to, like, have people that we love us in return kind of thing. You know, I think at the base level of humanity, I suppose, getting real deep into it, we're all just people anyway. And I don't really get why gender plays into that. You know, outside of, like, you need sperm and an egg to make a baby, I don't think that gender or sex makes any influence on me as a person, and I don't think it should make an influence on people in general. You know, and as much as I say that, obviously then there's the case of, like, well, a trans person didn't feel right in their body, so they've, like, changed gender or changed, you know, they've transitioned is the fucking word. So as much as, like, I'm like, well, there's no such thing as gender, there obviously is, because otherwise people wouldn't feel that way. Like, they wouldn't feel the need to transition because, oh, gender's just whatever, I'll just wear what I want. You know, they wouldn't care. Whereas obviously then, like, body dysmorphia and things like that come around, or, like, gender dysmorphia. I'm clearly not the most educated, that's why we're not making this all about trans people. But, you know, I just want to put out there that I do understand that to some people gender really does matter, and it's not just a social construct, it's the way that you feel. And that's entirely valid for you. That's just not how I feel about it. You know, and especially when you get into, like, I've had quite a few friends that have told me, like, oh, I wish I could do like you do and just wear men's clothing. And it's a case of, like, oh, well, I wasn't seeing it as me wearing men's clothing up until you've said that. I just saw it as, like, oh, I really liked these pants, so I bought them and put them on, you know? I really don't understand why things are gendered. And I think not understanding why things are gendered definitely plays into it as well, because it means that I do and have always had just a mixture of both genders, I suppose. And it is difficult, because even having the term Autigender, which I do feel I very much relate to, I'm kind of like, yeah, but what does that mean? You know, I can give these definitions and be like, oh, well, it's the way that my autism plays into, like, my gender and, like, the identity that I can have. But also, I don't understand gender at all. I think it's one of the weirdest social constructs that we have. And I don't think it should matter in the slightest. But at the same time, I'd really like to have my gender figured out, because I feel very uncomfortable being called a woman, but I don't want to be a man. But I don't think I'm non-binary or gender fluid either. And it'd just be really nice to know what I am. I suppose it may just be that I need to, like, more acquaintance myself with the term Autigender and maybe speak to other people that identify with that. Because it's definitely the term that I've come across that I most feel like suits me. And from the comments on the LGBTA wiki, there's a lot of people that very much see it the same way that I do, which is always nice. I love that. Like, I get quite a few comments now from people that say, like, they find me really relatable and stuff, and I think that, I don't know if y'all realise that, like, that's the same for me. Like, when you're commenting that, I'm like, oh, thank God someone else relates to that. Like, thank you. But yeah, so I think some degree of it is that I like to have terms that people understand, you know. I think, again, part of human nature is that we like to feel understood. And I don't want people, like, not that people ask me about my gender all the time anyway, because, like, I've got long hair, and even when I'm wearing male clothes, you can tell that I have, like, a female body. So it's not like I get questioned about it. But, you know, like, when you're making queer friends and stuff, it's something that comes up in conversation. Sorry, that was the postman. But yeah, when it comes up in conversation, I don't want to have to not only be explaining what my gender is, but then also be explaining what the term that I use to describe my gender is. And that's part of why I stopped calling myself pansexual as well. Like, there's a lot more to that. Watch the other video I made if you want to hear all about that one. But I don't want to have to over-explain myself when I could just have a simple term. And I feel like the gender term that's more known that I most relate to would be non-binary. But then I don't feel like I have a lack of gender, or that I'm, like, in between genders or anything. I'm not that educated on the whole non-binary thing. I'm now realising that that's something I should Google and know more about. But, you know, like, I don't feel like I relate to that, because I do feel like I have a gender. I just don't know what it is. And I suppose it's Autigender then, isn't it? But I don't know, there's just something about it where I'm a little, you know? And I don't know what that is. I'm not entirely sure what it is that makes me feel like that. I think perhaps some part of it is that, you know, as much as I make all of this autism content and talk about being autistic, it is still, like, to a degree, something that I'm coming to terms with. You know, being late diagnosed, it's a lot to take in. And perhaps I haven't fully accepted and processed it as much as I thought I had. So to then say that I also have Autigender, it's like another part of me is autistic, really? I think that might be what it is. I find it much harder to accept things about myself than I do about other people. I think that's in general, isn't it? It's harder to accept things about yourself than it is other people. And that means that I find it difficult to fully accept that being autistic does play into, like, a huge amount of who I am. This video is about to turn into a slightly different conversation, but it is very much a case of, you know, being autistic affects so much of me. And the more I learn about being autistic and the more I like interact with other autistic people and watch videos about being autistic, it does kind of feel like the more my uniqueness is being taken away, because it's a lot of things that were like my quirks and just Dana being Dana. It's autistic traits. It's autistic traits. So it kind of feels like it's being taken off me and, like, being replaced with, like, oh no, it's not a Dana thing, it's an autism thing. And then my gender's that as well. We figured that out. That's what that is. See, like, this is why therapy is helpful. I wouldn't just sit and talk to myself like this were I not making a video. I would have had a therapist and then I would have figured this out with them. But I can't afford therapy. You know, and like I say, gender and sexuality and things related to it are fluid and they are a spectrum and they can vary. So, you know, maybe I'll figure out that I am in fact something else. Maybe I'll figure out that I'm making a bigger deal out of this than I need to. I don't know. But that's definitely how I feel at the minute, you know? I feel like I very strongly relate to the whole Autigender thing, but I'm maybe not quite ready to fully accept that about myself. Something to work on for me, isn't it? There's a little challenge for me. But yeah, I think that brings us to the end of this video. I've not got anything else to say about it. I would love to hear your opinions on this in the comments. I'd really, really like to hear opinions on this one. I'd love to hear if you want to tell me about how you, like, understand your gender to be and you're like, what's going on with your gender, huh? I just think it's an interesting topic. And I think especially, like, that things like Autigender is a term that's used by people does show that, you know, gender is a very odd social construct that we don't need to abide by should we choose not to if we don't want to, you know? And in the same way, if you want to go by it, if you feel that it's right for you, then yeah, good for you. You know, I'm not trying to take anything away from anyone. I'm just trying to figure myself out and maybe help out some other autistic people while I'm doing that. So please do like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the video. I really, like, if you liked the video, you will remember to like and subscribe, but I keep getting told I should say it, so there you go. But whoever you are and wherever you are, I hope you're having a lovely morning, evening, afternoon, day, week, month, year, and I'll see you again in a few days.